Right, good evening everybody.
Good evening.
7 o'clock. Welcome to the December Development Control Committee meeting. Just a few housekeeping bits to do first. In accordance with the Openness of Local Bodies Regulations 2014, this meeting is being live streamed and may otherwise be recorded, filmed or communicated on other media platforms. Recording of this meeting will be made via the Council's YouTube channel shortly after the meeting. Both councillors and officers in attendance are reminded to make full use of and speak clearly into the microphones available at all times. Reminder that mobile phones should be turned off or put on silent mode. Those present at the meeting should refrain from taking telephone calls. Like reminder that those members of the public in attendance must not act in a disorderly or disruptive manner or otherwise interfere with the proper conduct of its business. Thank you. If there is any fire alarms this evening, it will be a real fire, so exits are to the rear and to the side. If you need any of the facilities, they are out of the door to the left. Anybody wishes to have any refreshments, it's over there, you're welcome. Okay. Right, moving through the agenda. I'm Councillor Bentley, by the way, I will be chairing this meeting. At present, I do not have a vice chair, so do I have any nominations for a vice chair?
Nominate Claire.
Okay.
Second.
Everybody happy with that? Yes, okay, thank you. Any apologies for absence?
Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Linda Borley, Councillor Frank Borley and Councillor Josh Reid.
Thank you. Do we have a microphone there?
Would you like me to say it again? Yes. Apologies for absence have been received from Councillor Linda Borley, Councillor Frank Borley and Councillor Josh Reid.
Thank you. Any appointments of substitutes?
And have been received, Chair.
Okay. Any declarations of interest? No. Minutes of the previous meeting, may they be signed? Okay. Right, moving on, reports of the Planning Policy and Development Manager, application number 22-00361, well, HM Young Offenders Institute, Glen Parva. We have two speakers. Mr. Hardy, would you like to come forward, sir? You have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a nod when you've got 1 minute left.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I'm Nick Hardy, I'm Town Planner, and I've advised the Ministry of Justice in relation to the redevelopment of Ford and Glen Parva prison for 4 or 5 years now. This proposal responds to the latest projected need for new prison places. Those projections changed sometime after the Ministry of Justice was granted planning permission for the new prison, which is why this application follows on sometime later. The proposal is for the same level of security, and so again is for category C adult male cases. The proposal is for 1 more house block, which will increase the capacity of the prison by 250 places, and for 1 additional building to accommodate uses that would support the new house block. Those are generally quiet uses, so classrooms, teaching space, and administrative space. The rest of the site will be kept free from development and will be managed through ecology and biodiversity. This is partly to meet the MOJ that wish to achieve biodiversity net gain on its projects. And this might will achieve in the order of a 3.5% net gain. It's also there to provide opportunities for prisoners to contribute to its management. The site's planning history includes the planning permissions were granted in 2010. 2014 for the development of the site for 7 house blocks, support buildings and about 300 car parking spaces. So this application proposes far less work development than those previous applications. It also gives clarity to the community over the use of the entire site, which has been uncertain for the 5 years or so since the outline permission for the main site was granted. When the Ministry of Justice applied for the reserved matters consent on the main site, it worked very closely with officers to ensure that impacts on the community around the site, and once the prison was built and operational, were minimised. The Ministry has the same objectives excuse me, with this proposal, and supplied the lessons that were learned from the main site to this application. Housewalk is the largest building, it's sited centrally, away from both the western and eastern boundaries. The separation distance is considerable at about 60 to 65 metres. The support building is located between the housewalk and the housing, school and children's centre on the western side of the site, interrupting the line of sight between them to mitigate any concerns about overlooking. The windows on the western elevation of the support building are obscure glazed, as with the workshops on the main site. And the windows in the housewalk will be now opening to address any concerns about noise. And ensure that landscaping along the site's boundaries is unaffected by the proposals, and new landscaping is proposed. I've noted that there were 2 neighbour objections recorded on the officer's report, but those do not appear to raise concerns about the site layout, the design or its landscaping. But they are concerned about disturbance during the construction phase from dust, noise and traffic. And the applicant acknowledges those concerns and will review the measures which are in the current construction management plan, but it submits the new plan that will be required if this permission is granted. I noted there were no objections from the Highway Authority, from the Environmental Health Officer, or from any other consultees. And if there are, they're adequately dealt with by way of the proposed planning conditions. So overall, my client is grateful to officers for their advice before and after submission and for the recommendation to approve. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Mr. Chenery? Yours are 5 minutes and I'll give you another ring of 1 minute.
Good evening again, councillors and neighbours. This application is the second time I've spoken in front of you. I live in Crete Avenue. I'm one of the closest properties to the prison. I've also got one of the longest boundaries with the prison. So I've just come along to speak to you guys as Oadby and Wigston councillors to explain my objections to this application. Previously, I've not objected to the prison, but after 3 years of building, the extra traffic, the noise, the dust, the vibration, I really strongly object to this new application. My main concerns are regarding the plan to open up the prison and use it as a building site as well. We've been told to expect 18 months for that to happen. If anybody's been on Saffron Lane at 7 o'clock in the morning as they're all queuing up to get into the prison, I walked that one morning and the queue was all the way back to the Port Pie roundabout. It is very bad for the local residents. Dust, noise and vibration, as I've stated in my letter, sometimes I'm sat in my office at home and it feels like I'm in Jurassic Park. The vibration coming through from the building works is very disruptive. As I put in my letter, I haven't washed my car for 18 months because the amount of dust that we're getting. My wife only puts the washing out on a weekend because that's the only time that they're not excavating or dragging things about. What I'm asking you guys for tonight is at least the same conditions put on as we had originally. So we got respect for the working times, and working hours, so we don't get the disturbance. But I'm just really concerned about the extra 18 months of this site being a building site and a working prison. The prison's supposed to open at Q3 of 2023, and we're just concerned about the extra volume of traffic, the noise, and the disruption to us as Obion Wigstone residents, and that's why I'm here addressing you people tonight. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, okay, moving on. Who's going to take this, Adrian? Would you like to present the report then, please?
Thank you, Chair. This application is for the erection of a four-storey house block, providing accommodation for approximately 250 prisoners. A two-storey facilities building, a multi-use games area, an easy-space car park and associated landscaping, new and extended fencing, and an electricity substation. The majority of the sites and all of the built development lies
On just 1 second, Adrian.
Could we please have the microphone turned up a little bit? We can't
Could you speak a bit nearer to the microphone, please?
The majority of the sites and all of the built development lies within Blaby District Council's administrative area. Only the existing access along Tigers Road, part of the internal access road, a large part of the car park, an area of amenity grassland, and a small stretch of security fencing are within Obion Wigstone Borough Council's administrative area. As a result, Obion Wigstone Borough Council cannot assess or control the design, character and appearance implications of any of the proposed built form of the proposed scheme, as these fall within the administrative area of Blaby District Council. The area of land which comprises the application site is currently used for the siting of a temporary office building and a large car parking area associated with the new prison currently being constructed to the south of the site. As mentioned in the report, planning permission has previously been granted on the application site for a much larger scheme of development comprising 7 three-storey blocks, support buildings and a 300-staff car park. The current proposal proposes a reduction in the number of buildings, prisoners and 220 less car parking spaces. The proposed car park is in a similar location to that previously approved and is located in excess of 50 metres from the rear of the properties in Interstine Avenue. Landscaping and additional planting is proposed between the car park and the rear garden areas to ensure any impacts are kept as low as possible. Whilst the Environmental Health Officer initially raised some concerns over noise from the car park, following additional information received from the applicant, the Environmental Health Officer withdrew their concern. Given the previous permission for a more intense form of development, the distance from the residential properties and the existing and proposed fencing, it is not considered that the proposal will significantly impact on the amenity and neighbouring property. The access to the development is along Tigers Road. The Highway Authority has been consulted, and after reviewing the information provided in respect of personal injury collision, trip generation, trip distribution, highway impacts, the internal layout and transport sustainability, which is all set out in detail in the report. Given the scale of development and the relatively low level of vehicle trips which would result, it is the Highway Authority's view that the impacts of the development on highway safety would not be unacceptable. And when considered cumulatively with other developments, the impacts on the road network would not be severe. The request for a financial contribution towards air quality monitoring is noted. However, any request should be accompanied by evidence and justification. It is also noted that the construction company already has monitoring equipment installed on site at 7 points and are intending to install further monitoring stations on the application site should permission be granted. In view of this, and in the absence of any evidence and justification for the financial contribution, the Environmental Health Officer has recommended that the details of all construction measures and proposed mitigation be in the consultation management plan. In view of this, and in the absence of any evidence and justification for the financial contribution, the Environmental Health Officer has recommended that the details of all control measures and proposed mitigation be included in the construction management plan to be submitted and agreed. Accordingly, this has been included within the construction management plan condition. So if we turn now to the slide presentation. And we turn to slide 4. That shows the site location plan, with the red line showing the access from Tigers Road and the land to the north to which the application relates. The existing prison development can be seen to the south. The green line, which isn't very clear, but the green line marks the borough boundary with Blaby District, but I'll come to that in just a moment with a clearer line that shows that. If we turn now to slide 5, this shows the existing prison development to the south in colour. Within the red line can be seen the area of the temporary office building and the car parking, and that's shown in dotted lines. If we turn to slide 6, this is the proposed site plan. The car parking is to the east, and the house block and multi-use games area in the centre, and the facilities building can be seen to the west. Slide 7 shows the proposed fencing strategy. Slide 8 is the proposed landscaping plan. Slide 9 is the house block elevations, but obviously all within Blaby District. And slide 10, the facilities block elevations, also all within Blaby District. So that brings me on to slide 11. And this shows, highlighted in yellow, the areas of land within the red line that are located within the borough boundary. So in summary, when considering the nature of the parts of the development that are within the Borough Council's administrative area, and therefore for which we have control, it is considered that the proposal would not result in any unacceptable impact upon residential amenity or highway safety, which would justify a refusal. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions outlined in the report. If there's any questions, then I'll do my best to answer them.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I asked for this to come to committee. I know that the site is already developed and that I don't expect that we are going to be able to refuse this tonight. However, when I read the report, I was rather incensed because it talks about, and I accept and agree, that this development is in Blaby District Council and therefore they have the rights over the development on that site. But it talks about Oadby and Wigston only having a small part to play. But that small part is the most significant part of this application, of the whole site. Because without that small part in Oadby and Wigston, they couldn't access the site. Oadby and Wigston have access to the site. And therefore, everything that goes in and out of that site comes through Oadby and Wigston, specifically through South Wigston. It's already been mentioned tonight by one of the speakers that the traffic along Saffron Road, let me get it right, Saffron Lane Road, that changes from Saffron Lane at the roundabout, along that part, and I travel along there to go through South Wigston every week, almost on a daily basis. And you can be stuck in traffic for the full length from the Port Pie Library all the way through to St Thomas's Church. You can be stuck in traffic both ways. This application is not going to alleviate, it's going to aggravate that problem. Highways tell us South Wigston's already congested, so a little bit more won't matter. That's rubbish. We should not be adding to a problem. When this plan was thought through, it should have been thought of with a second access to the site. And as I understand, and I've no doubt Councillor Bolter will refer to it in a minute, it was already started and then disregarded. So therefore, we in Oadby and Wigston, and the people of South Wigston in particular, face this problem daily. This is going to make matters worse. Some people keep telling me it'll make it better. No, it won't. We've got a very poor access into the site. It's a mini roundabout, which most people don't even acknowledge is there. We should at the very least have traffic lights set up at that access, not a mini roundabout. At the very best, we should have a second access. And it just makes me very, very cross. But we can't control the development, but we can take all the aggro from it. I would like very much to refuse this. I know I won't stand a chance, and if it goes to appeal, it will just be passed straight through and will be completely ignored. But Oadby and Wigston should not be ignored. We should not be told that we only play a small part. We play a significant part in this, and we should not be ignored. I noticed when the other application's gone in for another prison a little bit further afield, in part of our parliamentary constituency, the big guns get involved. There's not a mention here, and that's a shame that we are not even considered by our own MP to be worthy of looking at this application. Is there any way we can ask and enforce an improved access at that junction with traffic lights?
Mr. Thorpe, would you like to answer that? Or Mr. Gill?
I think, well, firstly, I think I would comment that Oadby and Wigston Borough Council is of equal role in determining the application as Baby District Council does. Hence it being a committee tonight, as it will be Baby in terms of them making their decision. The difference is, as I said in my presentation, the amount of land in the borough is significantly smaller than the land in Baby, and therefore the area that we have control over of making a decision on is smaller, because we can't comment on, for example, the design of the buildings. But the access, as you rightly say, is within the borough, and that is part of our decision-making process in determining the application. However, there's 2 points to make in relation to this. The council has previously considered a planning application relating to this site, and that was for a larger scale of development of what we're currently considering this evening. And as the report points out, this is a smaller scale than what the site currently has permission for. The other comment that I would make is, of course, when it comes down to highways issues, we have to consult Leicestershire County Council as the Highways Authority, and they will provide the council with comments. Their comments are set out in the report in detail. We've made sure that we've done that for you so you can see in full their comments. And their recommendation, as Councillor Lloyd said, is cumulatively they don't consider it would have a significant impact on the highway. So therefore, in the light of the comments that the Highways Authority have provided, it would be difficult to ask for improved access, because the Highways Authority has said that the access as it currently stands is sufficient to accommodate that scale of development.
So Chair, the answer is no. Wouldn't it be nice if we could move all the highways officers to live down that road? And then let's see how they get to work in the morning and then get home at night. Thank you, Chair. I don't think I can go. I really just wanted, I suppose, the last application that Mr. Thorpe quite rightly said was a bigger one. We've come back with this slightly smaller one, but every single time it's the access, it's the impact, and it has a serious impact on the residents that live in that area and a little bit further afield. And yet highways think there's not a problem.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Could I just ask a couple of questions, Mr. Ford? It's been intimated that this is construction obviously being done under CDM regulations. I would have thought that under those regulations there would be a traffic management plan and also dust and noise management plans. Have we seen that?
No, as that we haven't seen that, but what we have in the conditions is a request for a construction management plan. Just try to scroll down to the relevant condition. So the condition says no development shall commence on the site until such time as a construction management plan has been received, and it sets out in the condition some of the things that we would expect to see in the construction management plan, and that's condition 3.
So that is going to be looked at before permission is actually officially granted?
That is correct, yes.
So, following the receiving of that and its approval, if it's approved, if there is any excess traffic, dust, noise, pollution, it can be tackled under environmental health conditions?
Yeah, so just to clarify, that we will want to see the construction management plan before development commences, not before permission is granted.
Okay. Councillor Bolter?
Thank you. Yes, several points. Mrs. Lloyd just covered some of them. Anyway, you say that these quality management facilities on the site, have you seen the results of those? That's the first one. The second one, I disagree with the county highways. Saffron Road is a nightmare. Traffic queuing, well, I don't know what their quality is on Saffron Road, but queuing traffic causes more problems than anything else, especially when you've got lorries queuing to unload at a site. So I think that needs looking at by environmental health. Put additional tubes in or something on that, so we can monitor that situation. I, for one, think there should be a second access to this site. City Council, some years ago, put half a road in across the park towards this site to aid the fair. And it goes on the park. It's not been on wit of man to actually continue that road and actually get into the site. So I wonder why it's not been looked at. I'm not interested in the cost of doing that. I'm looking after our residents. Cost is not a planning consideration. Look after the residents. It says in the report it's a private road. Not all private. Some might be. It's not all private road. That needs correcting. Yes, there's vibration, there's traffic queues, there's the working hours needs to be restricted. What about the solid wall that's along site at the moment? We were told in the previous application that would be retained. That seems to be forgotten about in this application. That needs confirming. There's some gaps in that wall now. I want those filled in. We don't want a fence, we want a solid wall. When this was raised at the previous meeting, I was told the wording is the same, whether it's a wall or it's a fence. We need a solid fence then, so we've completely sealed that site. I did talk to people at the time and they said yes, that they would reinstate the bit of damage to that wall, it'd be retained, so I want that to be done. We've resolved the surge issue, I assume, by now on that site, because there's a problem with surge there. May or may not be a planning consideration, but it needs addressing. And what we're doing about the working hours, can you explain what the working hours are, Mr. Thorpe? Particularly weekends and bank holidays. I know the government lifted some of these restrictions during COVID times. I understand they've been reinstated now.
Mr. Thorpe?
Thank you, Chair. There's a few things there, so I'll try and go through them in the order. In terms of the results of the air quality management, again, referring back to condition 3 and the construction management plan, it says the construction of the development shall thereafter be carried out in accordance with the approved details and timetable, and air quality monitoring updates shall be provided to a local planning authority upon request. So we have the ability to request those updates, results of the monitoring, and they will be provided to us. In terms of environmental health reviewing the construction management plan, I'm sure that will be possible, and we can make sure that they review it as part of the consideration before development commences. In terms of the working hours, the current working hours for the site, 8 AM till 6 PM, Mondays to Fridays, 8 AM to 1 PM on Saturdays, and that no work will be carried out on the site on Sundays and bank holidays. I don't see why we couldn't put a condition in, specifically referring to working hours in relation to this.
It'd be nice, Chair, to get to those conditions already, because they don't. They work outside those hours.
Well, that's something that will need monitoring, because if they are working outside, then hours they're going against the conditions of the planning. So that will have to be looked at.
That's hence I asked the question, Chair. Have the planning constraints been lifted during COVID? Have they been reinstated?
Mr. Ford?
The lifting of working hours during the COVID pandemic has now ceased, so they should be sticking to these current working hours. So, as the Chair said, we will follow that up.
Okay, there were a couple of questions there. One to do with previous applications stating solid walls as opposed to fencing. Do you have comments on that?
I don't, Chair, because I'm not fully aware of the detail in terms of what the previous application was asking for. I'm assuming, Councillor Bolton, that was a condition?
Yeah, Chair, it should have been a condition. Also, the condition should have been that there's some highway works where the traffic lights are going to be coordinated between the whole length of Saffron Road and Blaby Road, right the way through to Wakes Road. And that was agreed at committee and we voted on that, but I don't think that actually went through. And
Mr. Give an opinion on that?
Thank you, Chair. I don't see how you can have a condition that requires the County Highways Authority to do work that this authority thinks is appropriate, because at the end of the day, they are the Highways Authority. It's quite often that things are mentioned at committee that people would like it to be conditions, but unfortunately, when you look at the rules regarding conditions, it's not always possible to insert them into a planning permission.
Chair, if officers like to go back to the original application and look at what is recommended there, you'll find in there is the statement that the traffic management will be looked at with coordination with traffic lights.
But the fact that it may require looking at doesn't mean to say that the result will be coordination with the traffic lights. It will be looked at, and that the decision is informed by what county highways find and what they decide is appropriate.
Again, unfortunately, we're battling against county highways. There was a question regarding sewage, but I would have thought that's down to building control.
Condition, there's a condition with regard to water and sewage coming off the site.
Okay. Mr. Ford, you did mention that we could have access to the monitoring along the roads. If it's found that that monitoring is excessive, would we take action?
I think that the air quality monitoring systems that we have access to will be located within the site, not necessarily on the road. But yes, I don't see why Mr. Gill will be able to confirm, but why we couldn't take action if we needed to.
Could we condition that monitoring has to be along the access roads? Because that's where the problem is.
I think, Chair, the issue here is that, again, I refer back to the previous application that we've determined, which was for a larger scale development on the site. And at that time, we did not request any air quality management or any Section 106 contribution, for example, towards air quality management. This is a smaller site, a smaller scheme on the site, and therefore it wouldn't really be appropriate to request it now. However, as I said now, we will have access to some high quality monitoring that we can take into account.
Okay. Well, my concern is basically that, yes, I understand we have to take each application on its own merits, but the evidence is actually there, and shouldn't we be taking that evidence into account? I.e. the excessive traffic that is being actually physically seen? Is that not a material consideration that we should be taking into account, Mr. Gill?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the planning conditions, paragraph 55 of the NPPF sets out what a planning condition is and what is required. And the planning condition must satisfy all of the following tests. Firstly, it must be necessary. So, would the development be possible without a condition relating to air quality monitoring or something else? And the answer would be yes. So, in my view, it fails at the first hurdle. The second test is it's got to be relevant to planning. Is air quality monitoring relevant to the planning as a whole? A moot point. It's relevant to the development to be permitted. It has to be enforceable. If you impose a condition with regard to AQMs, what's the enforceability of it? The enforceability of it is that you use that information to then declare an air quality management zone. Yeah. That's impacts on everybody. It's got to be precise. So what then is, how do you measure it? What's your base level? We don't have that information at the moment. We don't have the information on the base level before the development. So how could you then argue that it can't be, more than, 10 micrograms above 100 if you don't know that it was 100 in the first place? And finally, it's got to be reasonable in all the respects. Now, my view is that in terms of the AQM, it fails as a planning condition. In terms of the highways issues, it fails on the basis that it's a county matter. I appreciate what Councillor Boulder said, that there was a discussion on the last occasion around looking at the traffic flow along that road, but that is not a matter that this committee has the power to enforce. There's been talk about the increase And I think what you have to bear in mind is that if there's going to be an increase in building work from this particular block, there's going to be a decrease in building work on the other blocks because they're due to be open. So when they become open, you will not be having the tradesmen, you will not be having the lorries, you will not be having the deliveries. And what you, the committee, got to do, have to look at that balance. My view is, or I'll be quite blunt about it, is that the officer's recommendation is correct and that you should approve the application, but it's a matter of this committee.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ridley.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions and an observation. The observation is, as ever with planning, there is a risk involved to this committee that if we turn down an application on appeal, we lose all the conditions. The conditions are, in my experience, being in this committee, the main power of this committee. So it's a risk for all of us if we say, if we turn down applications because the conditions can be lost on appeal. And there's 10 conditions attached to this recommendation. So, bearing that in mind, I've just got a couple of questions which I think have been answered, but I just want to clarify. Firstly, the management plan, condition 3, it said submitted for approval. Is that by officers? Just to confirm, make it clear who approves the management plan. And then on the air quality data, my scientific background comes into play. I always was taught to ask the question about how accurate something is and who controls that accuracy. So in this case, it's not the borough's air quality monitors, it would be the Ministry of Justice air quality monitors, and so they would be giving us that data. What say would we have in terms of checking the quality of that data? Is it accurate? Is it reliable? So I'll ask that question if we're provided with that data.
Mr. Gill.
Thank you, Chair. Well, in terms of the approval of the plan, then that's a matter for officers to use their technical expertise, not just planning officers, but it will also include officers for environmental health, and no doubt they'll take views from county highways as well to make sure that it works. In terms of the air quality monitoring, that is air quality monitoring that is on the site. It is not air quality monitoring that is on the public road or on the highways. And with regard to its accuracy and veracity, I think I might trust the Ministry of Justice to provide the correct information, because we have technical officers who understand what is being given and they will be able to interpret, and if they spot something that's not quite right, then it will be immediately raised. But I don't think it's in the Ministry of Justice's interest not to provide that information.
Thank you. In regard to your first question, if this committee refused an application and it went to appeal, the conditions could be removed. They are not always removed, but it is possible that the application is approved with no conditions attached, which is a serious risk. And yes, that is within the realms of this committee to make sure that that doesn't happen. There could also be costs associated to it, which would be paid out of public money if this committee is deemed to be reckless in its decision. So we have to be very careful on that point. You want to come back, Councillor Bridley?
Just say, obviously, in terms of the source of the data, but it's just because of my background that I am taught to always ask. Is this data trustworthy? Is it how are you checking it's trustworthy? Can I just very quickly ask about an earlier point that came up, which is to do with enforcement as well, probably within this application, because it was mentioned. Can it be made clear how we can, members of the public or whoever, if they've got what concerns about banning enforcement, how that's they can raise that concern, please?
Thank you, Chair. There's two aspects to it. There's planning enforcement in terms of breach of conditions. If members of the public think there's a breach of condition, then officers should be notified. The other aspect of it is in terms of environmental health, in terms of vibration, noise, and what would constitute a statutory nuisance. I'm aware that my environmental health officers have on occasions received complaints with regard to the work to the prison. They have attended, they have visited, they've investigated, and they do not meet the threshold to become a statutory nuisance or required any formal action. Generally speaking, they went and spoke to the site management, and the site management agreed that they would adopt what they should be doing, which is the work plan.
Okay. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Chair. A lot of what I'm doing here has been covered, but there is still some other bits. This is an application, but it's not really a planning application that we have any decision making on. What it really is an application where we've got to try and get the very, very best for the residents to make their lives slightly better, because we can't turn this down. We've got nowhere to go on it. So it's not really a planning decision we're making here. What we are doing here is really coming up with what we can that's going to be the best for our residents. So we talked about the traffic, and from this, the data used is 12 years nearly out of date. So what they've used for traffic is 2011, we're about to go to 2023. I'd imagine there's more cars on the road now than there was in 2011. There's far more traffic and everything else. So we're basing everything on 12-year-old data. Where else would you base that on apart from something that was government-driven? Because you wouldn't. And yet it clearly says in this report on page 15, the applicant has analysed the local journey to work data from the 2011 census to understand the likely travel loads of staff and visitors. Not much has changed in 12 years then, no? So we can go with that, yeah? If somebody said to you, in your line of work, we're going to base it on 2011, you'd go, hold on, not a chance, but we can on this. Brilliant, so that's really helpful to our residents. So what will the Ministry of Justice do to help us? Why can't they fund air quality monitoring in our area? Why can't they fund it at the roundabout, at Marstown, at Dorset, at Gloucester, all of those areas? Why can't they? You know, they want to help our residents and make it all nice for them. Why can't they fund it? Why does it have to be internally? You know, why aren't we asking these questions? That's a necessity. I think that's necessary, needed for them. Right? Highways, they're never going to help us. They're about as much use as a chocolate teapot. Right? So, what we're going to do is look after the residents. What about health? Okay? What about in 5-10 years? There's health issues for the residents that live around there. Who do they sue? Or do we go on the air quality that's in the boundary? What's carried over in the wind? Why can't we have this monitoring? Because why can't the residents sue them? What about damage to their houses? What about the vibrations affecting the foundations? Who do they sue? Or does the air quality control within the boundaries cover all of that? Where's all this protection for the residents? It's not spoken about. What about the fencing? I remember this at the very start. Myself and Councillor Bolter, we spoke to the residents. We were guaranteed that this was going to be concrete fencing, not some wooden fencing or anything. The lampposts that are in the area talked about, they are still powered by that area. Who's going to change the bulbs in those? Because they weren't doing it previously. Has that been looked after? Has that been taken into consideration for our residents? You know, all of this is, we used to have residents climbing up to swap the bulbs of the lampposts in the surrounding area because the Ministry of Justice couldn't be bothered, and yet they control it. None of these things have been taken into mind to protect the residents. We can't turn this down. We've got our hands tied. We all know that. So what we've got to do is set something out that is going to help the residents. We need to make sure that we can do the best for them on this. The working hours, we know they're breaking those rules, so what are we doing about it, right? What about the hours of work? Why do we have to give in to their working hours? Why can't we set stronger working hours? Or does that have to be done in the construction plan? Will we get to say on that, or will we be shot down that we're being unfair? Because at the moment it looks like they can be as unfair as they want, and we just have to be yes nodding dogs to them because we only have a small part to play. Something needs to be done. I need to know who's going to, if our residents suddenly get all sorts of breathing difficulties, and I know it talks about asthma in here, and I'm an asthma sufferer, but what about any of the other difficulties in 5, 10, 15 years? Can they sue the Ministry of Justice? Can they do that? What about when they go to sell a house? All of this surrounding area. And there's a report carried out, and because of the vibrations, it's damaged. Who pays for that to be fixed so that people can sell the houses? Where is any of this information? I don't see it, and therefore, what can we do? And we as a planning committee, although it isn't really a planning application, you know, it's just a nod through and out that nobody moans about. What can we do to help the residents? That's the answers I want. Not, we can't...
Can Mr Gill give you some form of answer?
Thank you. If you look at page 18 of the report, where it talks about section 106, funding and contribution for air quality monitoring, the reason why the Ministry of Justice, the developer, is not required to pay for it is because it doesn't meet the tests of the section 106, which says it's got to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. The air quality monitoring doesn't impact on the development, the acceptability of the development in planning terms. Directly related to the development and fairly and reasonably related in the scale and kind to the development. It failed those tests and it's set out quite clearly. That's why there is no section 106 funding for air quality monitoring. With regard to your question with regard to the who's going to be sued at some point in the future, who's going to be sued at some point in the future if something would be happen, would be the Ministry of Justice or anybody else that is in existence. There is quite clear case law relating to Corby, where lorry loads of stuff was trundled through Corby without covering, which resulted in people getting illnesses and injuries, and they were sued. So that solves that. With regard to the issue about subsidence or vibration and damage in that way, that's what insurance companies are for. If there's a problem which has been caused resulting in subsidence or vibration, the appropriate way to deal with it is for the owner to contact his insurance company, and his insurance company will deal with the Ministry of Justice or the builder or the developer who did it. That is not a planning matter. And you're saying that we're here to nod it through. We're not. We're here to make sure that we can put sufficient conditions on it to make it acceptable for it to continue. And bear in mind that the conditions on the original permission remain in place, and these will be additional with regard to this particular part of the site. So it's not just the 10 conditions we've got all the other conditions that are still there and still exempt, and it's down to the officers to make sure that the development plan that comes through is sufficiently strong and robust to protect the residents. With regard to all of the issues you're talking about, breaching, whatever, I'm not aware of any report of people saying that they are breaching their condition. And unless the council is told, we cannot go and investigate. If we are told, we will go and investigate. If we find that they are in breach and breaching a condition, we can serve a temporary stop notice on them, which lasts for 28 days. At the end of that 28 days, we can serve an enforcement notice on them. That is a very, very powerful weapon, but unless we are told so that we can go and find the evidence, I'm afraid the council can't do that.
Okay, so the basic advice is if anything is considered to be in breach of the permission, it needs to inform the council. If you want to come back, but can we?
Yeah.
We need to move on.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gill, because I'm highlighting it, and Mr. Gill's now giving the information, which is empowering the residents.
Yes.
Because if it's not spoken about, how will they know? So if I highlight it, Mr. Gill's rightly saying, he's mentioned the Corby thing, they now know. They're given that information. And that's why I need to say it, so that they can hear it, because the Ministry of Justice should be doing it. If the Ministry of Justice was decent people, wouldn't they be doing their best for the members of the public? And therefore, couldn't they find the money to put the air quality control? Because they can find the money the government can for many, many, many other things that suits them. Can they not find it to help the residents? I'm sure if they were decent enough, they could.
We've been informed of what should be done, so we need to move on, Councillor Morris.
It looks to me like this is a might is right. They've got the right, so therefore they're right. And that's my issue. Mr Gill needs to highlight this so the residents know what they need to do.
Well, he's just done that.
That is exactly
Okay.
what I'm reading.
Okay, thank you. Right, we need to move on now. There's no more speakers.
Chair, I did put my hand up quite a while ago. I do want to come back. Yeah, Mr Thorpe said we didn't ask for it at the last planning permission, planning application, therefore we shouldn't be asking for it. I don't agree with that. That was a separate application. This is another application. I don't like being browbeaten over this. I think that we could go back to the applicant and ask for air quality management at that junction, because it would help us to look at future planning along that road. And I think that that is a very justifiable way of going about this. We are not instructing, we are not conditioning, we are asking. We did this, if I remember, at the Liddell and Wick site, who told us we couldn't have it along there. And they came back and said, yes, they were quite happy to put that in. Now, I think there is a reasonable request to ask, because it will help us as a borough. It will help highways, who obviously need to upgrade their data, and it will help them to future plan for our residents. And I don't think that is an unreasonable thing to ask.
Okay, Mr. Gill.
Thank you. The request has already been made, Councillor Wendell. It's in the report. The Environmental Health Officer went back and asked for a contribution through the Section 106 agreement for AQNs, and it was refused. There is no power to condition it. If members try to put a condition on this application seeking the AQM before permission was granted, then you would be in serious trouble, because it is unreasonable and there would be costs. In the Liddell case, which I also represented, it was again my advice at that time that AQNs did not fall within the Section 106 agreements. And you're quite right, Liddell and Wicks offered and agreed. That's fine. We've asked the Ministry of Justice, but they've said no. And that's as far as we can go with it. We can't keep going back to them, asking for it when they've made their position quite clear they are not going to fund it.
Okay. Can we move on now? Can we move on now?
No, the answer wasn't answered regarding the side wall. That was not.
Mr. Thorpe?
I'm not quite sure with the background to the query that Councillor Gold was raising, but certainly I'm not aware of any conditioning that in relation to the previous application relating to the wall. As Mr. Gill said, it may have been discussed, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it was met the conditions to be able to put it into the condition in relation to the decision that was made.
Can I ask that that be looked into outside of this room? Okay. Right, we have no more speakers, we must move on. I don't want to appear as if I'm worrying, but we must move on. So I am going to officially move the application for permit from the chair, and I would ask for a seconder. Councillor Corfman. So it's been moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Corfman. All those in favour of permit? 4. All against? Any abstentions? The application is permitted. Thank you. If anybody wishes to leave, please be welcome to do so. Yes. We'll adjourn for 5 minutes while people can take a comfort break or get refreshments.
Mr Gilwood, I thought we could beat him to it.
Okay, so we're next looking at application 2200-392 FUL, Wilson Academy Station Road. We have one speaker, Mr Carter. 5 minutes, sir, and I'll give you a nod when you've got 1 minute left.
I don't think it'll take 5 minutes. Right, good evening all. This is simply from the experience of the last goings on. It was an health and safety matter, basically. I and my friends over there are residents of Seaton Road, where this unit, that heat power unit, is intended to be fitted. And what we're concerned about is we're not objecting to the application to have a unit there, because I mean this is forward thinking as we're going on now with new heating. But what we're concerned about is where it is being positioned is that it is onto the backs of our properties. And any, shall we say, noise is a health and safety, big health and safety matter when there is ample space for it to be fitted elsewhere, out of the way of interfering with our properties. There's about 6 properties that I would say that will be required to have where we allow noise of these fans and any other noise from these units. I know it's been sort of put, some baffling being put around it, but I'm sure that is not going to be sufficient. And all we're going to get all day is a drumming sound from these units going into the school units for the heating working. So what we're proposing is that we want to be assured that we are getting to have no noise sort of thing in the daytime or whenever it's running to interfere with our lives. As in previous, your other problem here tonight, we've got our properties to look after, and anything like this is only going to degrade them and devalue them. So therefore, what we're looking for, and I think most of you have had a letter, what we have had from our MP, stating he's been to this school, and they have agreed that they see no reason why it can't be moved. So what we're trying to do now is to get your approval before it's too late to get it moved to a more suitable position. That is overall what we're trying to do. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr Carter. Would you like to take a seat on that? Okay, moving on. Would you like to present your report, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. So yes, this is for the Wigston Academy proposal for an air source heat pump. Next slide, please. On the screen. Yeah, so it's proposed to replace their gas-fired boiler, which is reaching the end of its life, and so the school plans to secure a grant through the Condition Improvement Fund to find a more energy-saving or efficient form of heating the school and the water. It's going to be sited on the eastern side of the school, about halfway down from where we are here, as shown on that arrow plan there. Next slide, please. So now we've got the aerial view, which gives a better idea of it. We've got a small spinney of trees to the south of where it's being proposed before you get to the playground area and the playing field. The bulk of the school buildings then are to the north and west. To the east then you've got the bungalows along Seaton Road, adjacent to where the air source heat pump is proposed. Next slide please. A zoomed in version then of the proposed block plan, which shows the location of the air source heat pump. The building to the west is a mobile classroom, and then there is a two-storey teaching block to the north there. The blue line represents the boundary of the school and the rear property boundaries of bungalows on Seaton Road. Next slide. Thanks. So just a view of the proposed plans then. The air source heat pump will be enclosed by timber acoustic fencing as shown there, approximately 2.85 metres high, and chamfered in at the top. There's a seal between that, that break there, and yeah, next slide please. And then the plan here shows an overview of it. The sealable double doors as well. As you can see there from the plan, it's an open top enclosure. One of the objections raised the fair enough question of why couldn't it be fully enclosed. The reason for that is being an air source heat pump, it actually needs that flow of air in order to function, and therefore that's why it's open at the top. The next couple of slides then just show zoomed in version of those previous plans, so you can get a better idea of the timber enclosure with a rubber kick band at the bottom there. And again on the next one. And then the next slide. Then a Google Earth 3D representation and give you a better idea of the context of where it would be sited. In looking at the acceptability of the proposal, the two aspects of it is the principle of development and then the impact upon residential amenity. They are rather entwined in terms of principle of development, but our policies, specifically policy 38, relates to low carbon energy schemes to which this would comply, being a low carbon scheme, provided that it is acceptable in terms of visual impact, environment and amenity. In terms of visual impact, it is small in scale in relation to both the surrounding properties and the school itself. It would not be visible from either Seaton Road or Station Road at the top, and it's well screened in that regard. In terms of the impact on amenity, go to the next slide, that just gives a turned around look of the unit. This location, which is on an area of unused hard standing. Next slide, thanks. So in terms of amenity impact, a noise report has been undertaken as part of the application in accordance with the various British standards to which we would have record in the relevant guidance. Environment health officers have assessed the application, both the methodology and the results, and it's been undertaken under worst case scenarios, that being the depths of winter, such as tonight, and how it would function. Specifically, it would be used most in the morning between 8 AM and 9 AM prior to the school opening then for students. It would have restrictions in place, as set out in the officer report. There's a breakdown of the noise, the closest dwellings you can see there by that line, approximately 26 metres away from the nearest residential side. The noise closest to the boundary and nighttime, as well as noise to the school itself. The conclusions of the noise report found that when taking into account the timber acoustic enclosure, the distance away and the background noise, there's found there would be no perceptible noise from the air source heat pump at the sensitive receptors. Basically, background noise and the timber fencing would basically cancel it out, so it would not be audible. There is a condition proposed in the officer report that sets out that it would need to be installed in accordance with this noise report, the timber fencing, to ensure that there would be no detrimental impact upon sensitive receptors such as the residential area. The next slides go through basically just some photographs of the location and the surroundings. So that's it, looking to the west school area from the proposed location. The area highlighted there. Next slide please, and just swirls around to the east, which then shows the relationship between the proposed location, and you can just see there highlighted the roof of the nearest property. The next slide then shows the corresponding view, the opposite view of that. And that it would not be visible from the top. I put in the officer report that it may just be visible, although as you can see from that photo that you wouldn't be able to see the mobile classroom from that height. Essentially when all the leaves have gone, there may be some view, but it would not be significant in the context of the larger surrounding buildings. And again, a similar view there. So, as has been highlighted by the gentleman there, in terms of potentially relocating it, officers have discussed this with the school. They seem to be amenable in principle to it, in the interest of being amenable to the neighbouring properties on Seaton Road. That discussion was taking place, that was put, as I understand it, to the acousticians and the agents and people who were basically in charge of implementing it. It was found that it would be cost prohibitive to do so, and that in the context of the noise report, that concluded that there wouldn't be a detrimental impact subject to those conditions and having that acoustic functioning in, that relocation would be unnecessary. And on that basis, then, they did not offer to move it. Given all that, given the noise report and the proposed conditions, it is considered that the development would not be contrary to the local plan or the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore it is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Just so that we've got it on record, I'm sorry you can't speak in the meeting, I'm sorry. Just so we've got it on record, we do have a copy of Mr. O'Brien's letter. I am going to read it out. Reference air source heat pump at Wigston Academy. Many thanks for your letter regarding a proposal for an air source heat pump at Wigston Academy. I have contacted the Academy about this. I understand that the plan was to replace the inefficient boiler at the Academy. They have informed me that they have no intention of becoming bad neighbours and want to get along with the local community. They have informed me that they are conscious about the noise pollution and the effect this would have on the lives of residents nearby. As such, they have told me that they are looking to have the boiler sited somewhere further away. I hope this provides some reassurance, but please get in touch if I can be of any further assistance. I just want that on record, as unfortunately Mr. O'Brien was unable to attend the meeting to read it out himself. I do believe that officers have had the same conversation, so we'll move forward. Councillor Lloydell.
Yes, Chair, it seems from the letter that they are recognising that there's going to be noise pollution. Thank you. This letter from Neil O'Brien does say that. They have informed me that they're conscious, that the school are aware that there will be noise pollution and the effect that this will have on the lives of residents. So they seem to be aware of that. Obviously, they've been re-advised by the people who are going to install this that that's not going to be the case. I've got concerns over that. Could I ask, please, having read this report about the noise levels, especially at night, goes down to 17 decibels. Now, I don't know what 17 decibels are, but I do know that when the surrounding area is quiet, the noise can be louder from anything. So will there be a background hum noise, which is going to be very disturbing for residents through the night? That's one question. Secondly, can because we always use this word mitigation, can there be mitigation by tree planting, which I understand from our arboriculturalists will absorb any noise? So could there be significant tree planting along that boundary which would offset any potential noise coming in? And thirdly, how many of those trees are already going to be taken out to put this in? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, try to reply to that, Andrew?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. Okay, so nighttime noise. There's a few examples in the officer report about decibel levels. So to give some examples, a soft whisper is on average about 30 decibels. A refrigerator hum is approximately 40, and normal conversation is around 60 decibels.
Sorry, say that again.
So the soft whisper is on average about 30 decibels. A refrigerator hum is approximately about 40, and normal conversation around 60. So the background levels for the nighttime noise around 17 is essentially very quiet. Also important to highlight that it's been done under worst case scenarios, but in reality the noise of the plant will be a lot lower during nighttime. Essentially it's ticking over as opposed to full whack, which would be, as I say, during that sort of 8 AM to 9 AM time. With regards to tree planting, that was one of the objections or comments raised by local residents. That was put to the acoustician, and if I haven't put it in the report, I apologise. I'm just looking for it, but they did come back to it, and they said that there wouldn't be any difference in terms of noise, in terms of tree planting. I have to come back to you on that point. I can find out their comments if you wish on that. In terms of trees to be removed, there's no trees proposed to be removed in order to install it. It would be on that existing concrete base, and then the pipework and everything else then would be away from those treed areas.
Okay, could I ask a few questions regarding this? Having read the noise assessment report in quite detail, I have a few problems with it. One of the statements is that if this is not done, the school will close. That is not something that should be in a noise assessment report for a start.
No.
Do we have any form of viability studies that would prove that point? Okay. Also, with regard to its location, it's also been stated within the report that they would be looking at a cost of £100,000 if it was located anywhere else. Am I right in saying that this plant would be heating the main building of the school? And if so, wouldn't siting it nearer to the actual school cut down the cost of installation? Because £100,000 is an extreme amount of money. I do come from a building background, and that is quite an amount of money. Because there's no real trenching involved in this. It's just pipe work. If it was a ground source heat equipment, I would expect trenching of quite a lot of it. But this would be piping, which can be done externally. It doesn't have to come under the ground. So I'm just concerned as to why this 100k figure is there, and that this committee has no form of viability study to actually evidence that cost and evidence why the unit has to go in this particular area. There are a number of areas around that school that don't include putting it on any form of sports areas, so sporting wouldn't be involved in this. I'm just concerned as to why this particular area when there are other areas. I do know quite a lot about this sort of equipment, and I will say the quoted efficiency ratings are quite correct. 400% efficient, i.e. 1 kilowatt of electricity going in, you get 4 kilowatts of heat coming back out. But that's in the middle of the summer. That is not in the depths of winter. When you go below 0 degrees, the efficiency can drop dramatically. Okay, I'm just a little bit concerned about the actual figures that have been put to us and the evidence base behind it. My personal opinion is that this committee needs that information. It needs some form of viability study, evidence in front of us, so that we can look at why these figures are being quoted, and if they are correct, that's fine. My personal opinion is that I would prefer that this be deferred until that evidence is put in front of us. I will quite happily go on with the meeting because there are other speakers wanting to speak, but I'm personally of the opinion that there's not enough evidence in front of me for me to make an informed decision on this. I am not against air source heat pumps. They are very good piece of equipment. They can be quite efficient, but also they are not carbon neutral because you're using electricity. Unless you get that electricity from a completely renewable source, it's coming from gas-powered power stations. It's good in its local area because it does reduce pollution. Compared to the gas central heating they've got at the moment, this is a hell of a lot better because it significantly reduces local pollution. But I'm just a little bit concerned about the figures that are being spouted. They seem to be right up there when they're actually a little bit further down. But I did ask a few questions there, I believe. The other question I have, the red line appears to be quite extreme on the plan. It goes from the actual site itself, spreads across the grounds and goes towards Seaton Road. Could you just explain why that is and why we don't have the viability assessments so we can make an informed decision? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So yes, to address those one by one, yes, there is no viability assessment with the application. It is the noise report. It wouldn't be a statutory requirement for a viability assessment, but if members are inclined to defer the application in order to obtain one, then I can go back and request that. In terms of the £100,000 that was quoted as part of a response from the people who are undertaking the installation in response to proposed moving it. In terms of near the school, I understand that other locations were considered, but that was the optimum area as a result of their plans. But I can secure further information if the members are minded to defer. In terms of the red line plan, essentially all planning applications, all the red lines, they have to connect to a public highway. So essentially that is the nearest section of the public highway. Alternatively, it can go around the whole site, which of course would go, include all the playing fields and every single building. What that would do is that would push that into beyond a hectare of site area, making it a major application. So it's they're perfectly entitled to do what they've done, and what that does is that prevents it becoming a major application, which in turn takes a long time to get up for them. So that's a choice they've made, but they're entitled to make it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kaufman.
Thank you, Chair. I don't profess to be an expert on heating, central heating, heat sources. I may or may not disagree with you if I had more knowledge of it. But the question I would like to ask is, if the performance figures don't perform, can we put a condition on that retrospectively they have to make it conform? And I'm saying this on the basis that let the school take the risk if they want to take the risk. But if the figures, the 17s, and I'm learning, is it 30 for a whisper and whatever, I mean, that was really useful information. If the figures of 17 and whatever it is they're promising down here don't work, are we able to enforce it as and make it work? Or am I going to be told that's an environmental health thing and because somebody else can do it, you can't include it in planning? But I would be more interested in saying, if you believe in your figures, you take the risk. And if when it's built and working, it doesn't work, you've got to put it right. Is there a way of doing that through conditioning and then we can let them take the risk?
Basically, I think the conditioning is if they don't comply with their own noise assessment report, which actually states that there should be 0 decibels above background noise at the boundary of the residential properties, they would have to have mitigation put in place to put it at that, or enforcement action should be taken against them. But again, I don't believe that there's sufficient evidence in front of us. So if you don't mind, I'm going to propose, before we go into any further debate on this, because if we carry on debating this, we won't be able to debate it in a second committee meeting. So I'm going to officially ask that we defer this and ask for a second on that.
Second, Chair.
Yeah.
Chair, can I just ask about the 9th of November? Because looking at page 26, page 26, the determination period for the application expired on the 9th of November.
Mr Gill will answer that.
Thank you, Chair. If the determination date was on the 9th of November, then theoretically they could have applied for a non-determination appeal already. We are pushing up for Christmas, so I think there's not going to be much happening this side. And given that we should be able to bring this back fairly rapidly at the January meeting, the reason I asked the Chair to not stifle the debate, but stop the debate is when you come back in January, you will want to be able to have that full discussion. The more you talk tonight, you park it behind you and you won't be able to deal with it. And if we end up with just the viability, when we come back in January, it will be the viability because you will have made a decision in principle that it's okay and that you might tie your own hands at that stage. Did you want to say something?
But we are okay to defer with it being out. That's what I just wanted to make clear. Obviously,
sorry, point of clarification, and it's my mistake, so I apologise. That 9th of November relates to the representations, so the expiry of the consultation period as opposed to the determination period. The determination period, I've secured an extension of time till the 21st of December. I can speak to the agent tomorrow to hopefully secure another one, although it would be up to them to agree that.
Good, thank you. Councillor Ridley, are you happy with not speaking?
Just to reiterate what you said earlier, but this conflict between what the MP's letters say and what's in the report in terms of moving forward, we will need affirmation when it comes back.
Councillor Lloyd?
Yes, Chair, very quickly. I agree with your recommendation, Chair. Fully support it. Could we just have clarification as well over why the company are saying its proposed location could cost around £100,000? That's a very funny little word there, could. Well, yes, if we move it the other side of Leicester, it probably could cost that. But, you know, just a small movement probably will not. We need some clarification. Thank you, Chair.
So I move deferment based on lack of evidence. That's been seconded by Councillor Bolter. All those in favour of deferment to come back in the January committee? It's unanimous. That application is deferred. Thank you. I now officially close the meeting. Thank you for your attendance and have a Merry Christmas and New Year, and I'll see you in January.